Hello once again, everyone, and as kind of the theme of this week has been, we're going to be going over some more sparring rules. Sorry for the delay as well in videos from last week. I was away at Oktoberfest, but I will be putting up footage of some of the things we did there. But either way, today we're going to be going over our Fechtschule rule set, and joining me today is Randy. Now, you may notice that Randy is not in the same amount of gear that he is normally when I am subjecting him to torture for the pleasure of YouTube audience. And the reason for that is that this particular rule set is aimed at being able to spar with newer people. So, for one, this rule set is focused around using synthetics. Not that you couldn't apply it to steel, and I have applied it to steel, but this is meant for the newer folks who can just come in, grab a sword off the rack, and start playing. Now, the name is also a key to kind of how the rule set works. Fechtschule were tournaments that were hosted historically, and the idea would be you're looking to strike the head. Sometimes it's looking to make like an inch of blood or just any blood appear, but if you hit someone off target hard enough that you injure them, then you would have to then pay their medical bills. It's a whole interesting thing that really you should look into on your own time because it gives a good insight into the past. But we've kind of taken that same idea and applied it as a rule set to allow us to relatively safely spar with these and get people starting to work on it. So, gear that you will require for this. You need a mask. You don't necessarily need the back of the head protector or a scrum cap, but you do need a mask. You also recommended that you have at least lacrosse gloves. He's got his sparring gloves thrown on, though you could still do it with light gloves just as long as you're careful. And then if you want to move into a more advanced version, you can also throw on the gorget. We'll get there in a minute. For now, though, basically mask plus what I'm wearing or what Randy's in right now is exactly what you're looking for. If you are wearing all of your gear already and you decide you need to spar with someone who doesn't have it, feel free to just, jump in and use that as target area. But either way, the way that this rule set works is that we're going to limit ourselves to cuts. So that means that if we're in this sort of bind, if we're in this sort of bind, right? If I want to set up a thrust, that's a problem because the thrusts are not going to be allowed. So I'll have to find a way to look for a cutting option instead, which there are plenty. Now the reason we're not doing thrusts is because neither fencer has a gorget right now. If both parties have a gorget, then you can allow thrusts. But for the vast majority of people first starting out, they don't have gorgets yet, so no thrusts. Now, I will get back to that topic again when I talk about some strategies a more experienced person can use in this game. But for now, the idea here is that I'm looking to just strike him on the head with about this amount of force. That's about the most you need to give. No harder than that, and you really don't need to move much faster than that. Now you are going to end up doing so, which is why you want to make sure you've got someone overall watching the floor, making sure everyone's staying at relatively light speed. But the purpose of this is not to, simulate any sparring you'll be doing later when there is full body target. It's to focus on isolating the important things. So, for example, if Randy and I are going against each other, we're not going to be worried about trying, go ahead, Spike, right? We're not going to be worried about trying to do anything particularly crazy. We're keeping out a distance and seeing what moves from both while shooting in at that head. So you notice how we're staying relatively far apart. If our blades start to get close, we focus on leaving or trying to work on the blade from there. Again, we'll get into that more in strategy. But let's get back to the rule set itself. So, strikes anywhere around here are good. Into the neck, dubious, so try to keep it kind of their jaw up. And then of course, no striking to the back of the head. No thrusts if one person doesn't have a gorget. No grappling, either at the swords or at the body, and no pommels. Now, again, we'll talk about that some more in a bit, but generally that means, okay, the awkward place is what do we do if we get super close? What I recommend you do from this position is focus on using your sword to prevent them from hitting you and move away from them. It's not that hard to get into your mindset, but in general, this rule set is going to encourage the idea of you being at decent distance and using the movement of your sword and the gaming of where your opponent is defending to work around them. So, that's really the kind of long and short of the rule set. Strikes to the head, no thrusts, focus on defending yourself, but there is one additive. If I strike Randy off target somewhere hard enough that he genuinely says, ow, that's a warning. You automatically lose that bout, you then salute, and then you go off and do whatever else. But if you do that twice in one day, regardless of who you are, you're done for the day. Because clearly you can't show control. Now, accidents do happen. For example, one of the more common things you'll see is people will start defending with the wrong part of their sword. And so, for example, I was trying to go for his head, but he put his hand in the way. That's a little different. Again, you've got that third party watching you know when things happen. This is again why I recommend at least lacrosse gloves, because that'll take a lot of the shock out of this in case you do mess up, especially when you're new. But some things I'd recommend you start doing in regards to behavior, which is what we're about to jump into, is the following. Number one, fight from good distance, right? If my goal is to hit Randy on the head, then I don't want to be any closer than how I need to be to hit him in the head. So, as such, I don't really want to ever get closer than about here. We're fighting against each other, so that means we're both kind of keeping our distance, moving around, seeing what we can nip in there. Now, you notice that one, I threw it as a strike, but it ended up as a thrust. That doesn't really break the rules, that was an accident, right? Exactly. And more often than not, you'll find accidental thrusts still occur here and there, but it's as long as it's the head, you really don't have much to worry about. It's when you start, really looking for thrust-specific things that tend to target more around here that it gets kind of dangerous. But I really recommend that you focus on, one, keeping your distance, two, being tricksy. Now, what you're gonna find happens when you first start playing this rule set or using it with newer people is that you're gonna start to get twitchy type fighters, right? Especially that if you're right? Where they're playing tag. How you encourage that is there still has to be some quality. So for example, this is a good shot. Okay? One hard shot, my body was into it. Alternatively, this is a good shot. Where enough of my body, enough of the sword moving is causing that quality. I still have to use my edge. No strikes with the flat, right? It can be either edge, but there's got to be that sort of engagement. What I really recommend if you're newer and you're jumping in and this is like, okay, I get the rules, but this is a lot to take in, focus on the basics, right? Basic, long edge toward him, right? He defends, okay? Where's he open? Long edge toward him with movement. Pretty straightforward. You can also, of course, use this time to move blades out of the way, etc. And that's where you start getting into some of the more, how do you cut when you should thrust. So, this is more for the advanced people, but basically, if their sword is in the way and you're like, okay, I should wind or something along those lines, feel free to use your edges to try and clear their sword out of the way for that quick little shot, right? All you gotta do is give a decent cut to the head. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, worm your way in there. Alternatively, let's say that you find yourself setting up for a wind, but you know you're not supposed to actually hit it. Anytime you do a wind, it can also be a cut or a slice. So, that's fine. That's just a little push cut. Same exact thing achieved. And in general, if you find yourself that's like, okay, the thrust is the best option, see if you can't turn it into a slice on their head instead. It's a good habit for you. Now, when it also comes to playing with more advanced people, this is for those of you that are in the school. Sometimes, especially if you're sparring Randy or I, and we are pretty much the only ones to this rule, we may grab your sword. The reason for this is that another part of it is eventually you'll get into the habit of kind of being here, and you'll get comfortable with like, okay, we're here, and neither of us are going to attack. If Randy or I are playing with you, we may show you like, hey, that's a thing, right? I say that only because, again, Randy's pretty much my most senior student, and then I'm, of course, the instructor here. The idea being, we're not trying to do as, we get a bonus option to you guys. It's, I'm trying to teach you while we spar. Randy's trying to do the same. However, for everyone else, don't worry about it, right? If you're super close up, get out of there. But if you see that, that's why. It's just because you're hanging out too close when you shouldn't be. Try to get away, and more often than not, the following will happen, right? So we close in, okay, I see that opening, and I want to tell Randy, hey, that opening's there, but Randy's being good and trying to escape. Oh, yep. It's very obvious that you just escaped a grappling attempt, and that's good. That teaches you something. Otherwise, though, the rest of the stuff is pretty standard. No strikes to back the head, no unarmed strikes, no pommels. Half sword's kind of debatable. If thrusts are allowed, like both people are wearing gorgets, in which case, that's fine, absolutely. And when you are wearing gorgets, really it's going to be the same stuff. Just direct your thrusts mostly to the face, and they'll occasionally hit down here, but generally nothing crazy. And above all else, remember that these bounce. So, I highly recommend that you get into the habit of cutting, not like that, where they go kind of wibbly-wobbly, but instead much more directing your cut out at the head as much as you can and working your way in. Otherwise, though, that's pretty much sums up Fechtschule unless you had anything to add. Cool.
Okay.
Awesome. So, that is our Fechtschule rule set. I highly recommend that those of you that are new to the school familiarize yourself with these rules, and you'll be playing with them a lot, as well as students in the future who might see them. We have been pretty good about not having many incidents. Again, just be nice, don't be a dick, like most rule sets, and things will work out quite well, allowing you to spar. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and we'll go over some other techniques another time.